Okay, part 47. I don't know, getting there. We're up to last year, so we're getting through this. October or September of 2018, the now infamous Brett Kavanaugh hearings. So President Trump decided to pick Brett Kavanaugh to fill the seat on the Supreme Court vacated by Justice Kennedy. Instead of the more conservative Amy Coney Barrett, who he wanted to put on, but thought she was too conservative, as it were, and wouldn't get elected or confirmed. Before we go any further, I want to clarify some terms here. Sometimes I use, and other people use the word conservative or liberal when it comes to Supreme Court or Circuit Court judge appointees, etc. And these are actually not terms that anyone should ever use with regard to judges and justices, associate justices. Really, the term should be constitutionalist or not constitutionalist. Are they adhering to the Constitution or not? That's the only litmus test I care about. If they're conservative or said to be conservative, it means they are. And if they're liberal, that means they're not. It's pretty cut and dry on that score. But the term conservative judge or liberal judge really shouldn't ever be used. Constitutionalist, textualist, originalist, okay. And the opposite of whatever that is, okay. But those are the only terms that really matter, at least to me. Kavanaugh was still at least a textualist or an originalist, if nothing else. So, no, he was on the short list of appointees that Trump had created. His record up to that point was exemplary. He was a clerk for Justice Kennedy, ironically. He was exemplary as a lawyer. He was exemplary as his time on Ken Starr's investigative team against Clinton and regarding Monica Lewinsky and that scandal. And he was later sworn in as a D.C. Circuit Court judge by Justice Kennedy. Up to that point, no one had a problem with him. You might, except those liberals who are, don't like conservative judges. But for the most part, and in reality, his time as in the legal profession had gone unblemished. Now let's put this whole appointment to the Supreme Court in context, historical context. Democrats at the time were still furious that Senator Mitch McConnell and the Senate-held Republicans, the Republican-held Senate, I should say, would not allow Obama to appoint Judge Garland to fill Kennedy's seat in the last year of his presidency, an election year. And this flies in the face, hypocritically, of course, of their own beliefs. Because way back in 1992, then Senator Joe Biden went onto the floor of the Senate and said we should not allow any appointee for George H.W. Bush go through to confirmation in an election year, which 1992 was. So it's okay to go after the Republicans for trying to put someone on the bench and stop him from doing so in election year. But it's not okay for the Republicans to stop Obama, a Democrat, from doing the exact same thing in his final year. Yeah, no hypocrisy there at all. And this, of course, also ignores the fact that the Democrats have played politics with Supreme Court nominations going back from the beginning of, from way back during the Reagan era, when they went after Judge Bork and Ted Kennedy, the lion of the Senate, went out of his way and made a speech on the floor of the Senate talking about how a just a Judge Bork, or in his world, there would be all sorts of heinous things happening in our culture, and basically try to rip the man's reputation from stem to stern. And they did the same thing with Justice Thomas, which he later called a high-tech lynching. So the Democrats have a bad, bad history with how they conduct themselves with Republicans' nominations for Supreme Court. Meanwhile, Republicans put a lot of women and liberals on the court. I should say, people who later ended up voting with the left. And they tend to not stop these appointments unless they're just absolutely not fit for the job. For the most part, unanimous vote. A woman named Christine Blasey Ford, who was a professor at Palo Alto University, upon seeing that Brett Kavanaugh was about to be appointed to the Supreme Court, went to her congresswoman in Palo Alto, a woman named Anna Eshoo, who probably said you ought to go higher up the food chain. So she wrote a letter to her senator, Dianne Feinstein, Democrat, California, a now famous letter in July of 2018, which accused Brett Kavanaugh of sexual assault and attempted rape. Ford supposedly did not want to be named or identified in any way, although right around the exact same time she wrote the letter to Feinstein, she did an interview with the Washington Post. So that's kind of curious. The letter itself was held by Dianne Feinstein until the hearings, when she brought it out. I got a letter from a redacted person. She held that thing for 2 months. Whipped it out when they thought they were losing the case. She made this letter public. It was also leaked to the press. She said not by her staff, but who the hell else would have done it? Supposedly against Ford's wishes. During the confirmation hearings, other women miraculously surfaced out of the woodwork, out of nowhere. Deborah Ramirez, who accused him of sticking his penis in her face at a college dorm party. And Julie Swetnick, who said she saw him at parties where boys were lined up in hallways to a bedroom where girls were gang raped. And he was an active participant. And others. A few others. Anyway, so after 4 days of testimony, plus an extra day for just Ford and Kavanaugh, 20 days later to testify, the confirmation committee voted along party lines, I think it was 11 to 10, to send him to the Senate floor, his nomination to the Senate floor for a vote. He was subsequently confirmed, also along party lines, 50 to 48 on October 6, 2018, and then he became sworn in as a Supreme Court justice. Rush to judgment. Where to begin? I don't know where to begin. The media and the leftist culture had a field day with this one. But a series of lies and inconsistencies ruined their attempts to ruin Kavanaugh's career, his life, his family, his reputation. They tried. They tried mightily. But the problem was they had a bad person that they put out there to try to make this case. Someone who just wasn't believable enough. Not at first she was, and then she wasn't. Kind of interesting. One, Ford felt a duty to report the assault during the Supreme Court nomination hearings, but not when he was appointed to the D.C. Circuit Court 12 years earlier. So she had no problem with him being... Now, maybe she didn't know he was being appointed to the D.C. Circuit Court, but if she did, she didn't say a word then. Why now? 2, every single witness to Ford's claim denied her account, as did the witness that Julie Swetnick's story said was there. In other words, all these people's accounts of personal problems with and experience with what Kavanaugh supposedly did, the other people who were there said it never happened. None of it. That's a problem. 3, the Democrats kept insisting on more FBI investigations after the fact, trying to drag the hearings way out past Election Day. It was just a delay tactic. Despite an FBI background check 6 prior times on Kavanaugh for every single office he eventually obtained or filled. And those 6 prior investigations and background checks uncovered exactly 0 allegations of any misconduct of any kind, and despite it not being of any kind, and despite that fact of their request that the FBI investigate Kavanaugh more, and it wasn't done enough, and it wasn't done thoroughly enough. It wasn't the FBI's job to investigate sexual assaults. They're a federal organization. Bank robberies, felonies that cross state lines and things like that. That's their jurisdiction. An assault during a from some 30 plus years ago in the early 80s at a party or something is not the FBI's job, but to investigate. Left doesn't care. They made it sound like because we didn't, the Republicans didn't agree to an assault or an investigation, another investigation by the FBI, that somehow this whole thing was a farce. Wrong. 4, the left said her polygraph showed no inconsistencies, the polygraph that she took. By the way, there's a reason the polygraphs are not admissible, but we won't talk about that. No inconsistencies, except, of course, the fact that the number of people at the party, she said, was there, changed from the written statement that was the basis of the test to other statements she made. It was 4 boys, and it was 3 boys and a girl. It was 4 boys and 1 girl. The numbers always kept changing. So there may not have been any inconsistencies between the test and what she said on the written statement used for the test, but it was inconsistent with other things she said in the hearings. 5, she could not say when or where the party happened or how she got home. Details were foggy. Maybe this, maybe that. I don't know. I think maybe it was this time because around that time I was working over here and I was swimming over in this place and I had my bathing suit on underneath my clothes. So it must have been around here. It was the mid-'80s. It was the early 80s. It was the summer of '82. She was all over the frickin' place. She couldn't exactly say how many people. Were they boys or were they girls? She couldn't get the numbers right. She didn't have a clue how she got home. All she thought she heard was conversations, but she didn't know who they were. She didn't know what was said in another room that was adjoining the bedroom where she was being assaulted. Blah, 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 blah. Look, folks. I don't know a lot about it, and I won't pretend to do so. I don't have any experience with it, and I won't pretend to do so, have any. But when I heard people call radio stations and talk about this on news, mostly, of course, women who were actually raped or assaulted in their past, every single one of these women are consistent about one thing. Every one of them remembers every single detail and never forgot them. 10, 20, 30 years later, can remember what the guy smelled like, can remember everything about the time it happened, where it happened, when it happened, how they got there, how they got away from there. Everything, all of it. I won't say 100% of the time that's the case, but from what I heard and what I learned afterwards, it is like a vast, vast, vast majority of the times. The fact that this woman, Dr. Ford, couldn't remember crap about anything is enough to make the hackles on the back of your neck go up, and the liberals were completely disinterested in this fact. 6, she claimed to have a fear of flying, which is why she was not forthcoming or willing to come as quickly, let's say, to the hearings, even though Senator Chuck Grassley, who was the chairman of the committee at the time, was very flexible and even said, "We'll come to you." She claimed she never got the message through her lawyers that they were willing to come to her for her testimony. Well, either shame on her for lying or shame on her lawyers for wanting to make more of a spectacle out of this than it really had to be. Either way, her claim about being afraid to fly seems to fly in the face of fact, where she said she often flew for work and leisure. Which is it? Kavanaugh had a habit of keeping calendars, a habit he got from his father, like diaries, meaning he wrote meticulous notes in his calendars about where he was going, things he was doing, and he kept these calendars his whole life, going all the way back to his teenage years, including the one from 1982 when these alleged things occurred. In his calendars, he meticulously notated things like activities relating to parties he went to, sports, travel, movies he saw or went to, and it has absolutely no mention of attending a party on the date in question. Why would he be meticulous about everything and then suddenly leave out the one party that would have placed him at the time in that situation? The left says that it is the calendar and the is proof of nothing, meaning it doesn't disprove or prove his guilt or innocence, except for one little fact, which I just stated: the convenience of it missing this one particular party that he supposedly was at, when everything else he wrote in there was as meticulous as they come. Why would he suddenly conveniently have left out that party? No one can answer. Many on the left said, "I believe her," echoing Hillary Clinton's admonition that all women should be believed regarding assault and rape, except, of course, her husband's accusers, when they're accusing him of assault and rape. But we all know Hillary Clinton is a Class A hypocrite. Of the people who said, I believe her, without having any facts or any information to base this belief on, were Senator Hirono, Democrat, Hawaii, Senator Cory Booker, Democrat, somewhere in the East Coast, I don't know, Senator Kamala Harris, Democrat, California, Senator Whitehouse, Democrat, who cares from where, Senator Kirsten Gillibrand, Democrat, New York, Senator Blumenthal, Democrat, I think, New York. 2 of those, by the way, running for president this coming election. And then actresses, Alyssa Milano, Kathy Griffin, or actors, Kathy Griffin, John Cusack, Patricia Arquette, Ellen DeGeneres, Ashley Judge, etc., etc., etc. There was a buttload of them. I believe her. I believe her. Oh, stay strong, Dr. Ford. The Me Too movement came out of this incident, which, of course, flied in the face of people who are really victims of rape and assault. But that goes without saying, I suppose. There's also the case of the fact that 2 other men came forward stating that they may have been the women who assaulted Blasey Ford and who she is actually thinking of, not Brett Kavanaugh. But they were completely ignored by the left media. Brett Kavanaugh family received death threats. Family, his wife, his girls. He was told he couldn't coach their team anymore. It was basketball or some team like that anymore, because now he was considered some kind of a child pedophile, even though he was being accused of a rape, not pedophilia. The left pointed out that Kavanaugh's angry response on Fox News proved that he was unfit for the Supreme Court. Look at this angry man. Look, folks, if your reputation was sullied in the way his was sullied, where he was blamed without proof, that he was piled on as a bad man with no bad things ever happening in his past before, and being a very religious man on top of it, where his life, his family was attacked, his reputation destroyed, possibly forever, wouldn't you be mad too? Of course he was mad. I would be mad too. An unprovable allegation. I say that because there's no way to prove it or disprove it. Should never even have seen the light of day. An unprovable allegation with no police report filed. The 1-year statute of limitations on what at the time was a misdemeanor sexual assault case had been long up. Fifth Amendment abuses in terms of due process and presumed innocence thrown out the door, and a coordinated effort by the left to ignore all of it, to destroy a man just to screw Republicans, to get them back for not allowing Judge Garland to be on the Supreme Court or have his day as a confirmee, appointee. That's sick, folks. That is truly sick. And no apologies. They still say he's guilty. It's unreal. We'll see you in the next part.